Ma'am, my dad asked me to give you this folder. The 11-year-old boy stood quietly outside the CEO's office, holding a blue file tightly against his chest. His small hands were shaking. The receptionist looked at him with confusion. "Where's your father?" The boy lowered his eyes. "He left for work early this morning. He said this folder must reach the CEO before anyone else sees it, but he never got the chance." Inside the office, CEO Sophia Morgan heard the conversation and stepped outside. The moment she saw the child, she frowned. "This folder is from your father?" The boy nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Sophia slowly opened the file. Within seconds, the color drained from her face. Her hands began to tremble. The papers inside exposed a betrayal worth millions of dollars. And suddenly, she realized the quiet employee she had humiliated every single day had been trying to save her company all along. She looked at the boy with tears in her eyes. "Take me to your father. Right now." 20 minutes earlier, Daniel Brooks had quietly slipped out of his apartment before sunrise. He didn't want to wake his wife, Emma, or his 11-year-old son, Noah. Every morning began the same way. Coffee left untouched, a rushed goodbye, and another long day at Morgan Technologies, where he worked as a senior records clerk. Daniel wasn't lazy or incompetent. In fact, he was one of the most honest employees in the company. But for reasons no one understood, CEO Sophia Morgan never seemed satisfied with his work. She criticized him in meetings, pointed out tiny mistakes in front of the entire staff, and often assigned him work that should have been divided among 3 employees. Daniel accepted every insult without arguing. He had only one goal: to provide a better life for Noah. As he reached the office building that morning, he tightened his grip on the blue folder inside his briefcase. He had discovered something the previous evening that could change everything. If those documents reached the CEO in time, someone very powerful inside the company would lose everything. The office was already buzzing when Daniel walked through the entrance. Conversations stopped for a moment. A few employees exchanged knowing smiles. "Look who's here," one whispered. "The CEO's favorite target." Soft laughter spread across the room. Daniel pretended not to hear. He greeted everyone politely and sat at his desk. A minute later, his closest friend, Michael Turner, walked over carrying 2 cups of coffee. "I brought your favorite," Michael said quietly. Daniel smiled. "You didn't have to." Michael glanced around to make sure no one was listening. "Daniel, this has gone too far. Every meeting ends with you being blamed for something. You work harder than anyone here." Daniel sighed. "Some battles aren't worth fighting. But this isn't fair." Daniel placed a hand on his friend's shoulder. "I know, but if I lose this job, Noah loses more than I do." Before Michael could reply, the office speakers came alive. "Mr. Daniel Brooks," the receptionist announced. "CEO Sophia Morgan wants you in the conference room immediately." The entire office fell silent. Several employees looked at Daniel with sympathy. Everyone knew what usually happened whenever the CEO called him in front of the staff. Daniel entered the conference room and quietly closed the door behind him. Sophia Morgan stood at the head of the table, surrounded by department managers. Without even looking up from the report in her hands, she spoke. "Mr. Brooks, explain why yesterday's compliance report was submitted 12 minutes late." Daniel remained calm. "Ma'am, the finance department sent the final figures behind schedule. I submitted the report as soon as I received them." Before he could finish, one of the managers interrupted. "Excuses again." Several people around the table laughed. Sophia placed the report on the table. "Whether it was your fault or not is irrelevant. I expect results, not explanations." She then pointed toward a stack of files. "Those audit records were assigned to 3 departments. Since they failed to finish them, you'll complete all of them before you leave today." Daniel looked at the mountain of paperwork. It was impossible for one person to finish in a single day. Even Michael, standing near the back of the room, lowered his head in frustration. Everyone knew Daniel was being treated unfairly, but no one had the courage to speak against the CEO. Daniel quietly carried the heavy stack of files back to his desk. Before he could even sit down, another employee dropped 2 more folders beside him. "The CEO wants these finished too," he said before walking away. Michael couldn't stay silent anymore. "This isn't right," he whispered. "Half this work belongs to other departments." Daniel smiled faintly. "Let it go." "No, Daniel." She keeps treating you like this because no one speaks up. Daniel looked around the office. Everyone had heard the conversation, yet every pair of eyes quickly turned back to their computer screens. They have families too, Daniel said softly. I don't blame them. The day dragged on. While others left for lunch, Daniel remained at his desk, checking reports and organizing records. At nearly 3 o'clock, he finally stood up to get a glass of water. As he passed the executive corridor, he heard raised voices coming from the records department. One of the senior managers was arguing with someone behind a half-open door. Daniel wasn't trying to listen, but one sentence made him stop in his tracks. If those ownership files ever reach the CEO, the manager hissed, everything we've built will fall apart. Daniel slowed his steps and glanced through the narrow opening in the door. Inside, Operations Manager Richard Collins was hurriedly stuffing several legal documents into a black briefcase while speaking on the phone. Don't worry, Richard whispered. Once these papers are signed, the transfer will be complete. Sophia won't realize what's happened until it's too late. Daniel's heart skipped a beat. He quietly took out his phone and snapped a few photos through the gap before walking away unnoticed. Back at his desk, he couldn't stop thinking about what he had heard. Late that evening, after almost everyone had gone home, he searched the company's digital archive. Within minutes, he found something shocking. Several property ownership records had been altered. Signatures had been forged. Approval dates had been changed. And every document carried Richard Collins' authorization. Daniel immediately printed copies of the evidence and carefully placed them inside a blue folder. He looked at the clock. 9:47 p.m. I'll hand this to the CEO first thing tomorrow morning, he whispered. What Daniel didn't know was that someone had been watching him leave the records room. The next morning, Daniel woke up earlier than usual. He carefully placed the blue folder inside his leather briefcase and headed toward the kitchen. Emma smiled as she served breakfast. At least eat something before you leave. Daniel glanced at the clock and shook his head. I can't. I have to be at the office before everyone else. Noah looked up from the table. Is everything okay, Dad? Daniel knelt beside his son and gently ruffled his hair. It will be, once I give something important to my CEO. He kissed Noah on the forehead, grabbed his briefcase, and hurried out the door. Neither Daniel nor Emma noticed what had happened. As he rushed outside, the blue folder had slipped out of the briefcase and landed beneath the hallway table. An hour later, Daniel reached Morgan Technologies. He opened his briefcase. His smile disappeared. He searched every pocket once, then twice, then a third time. The folder was gone. His face turned pale. At that exact moment, Richard Collins walked into the office, looked Daniel straight in the eye, and smiled. I've been looking for you, he said quietly. I know you took something that doesn't belong to you. Daniel forced himself to stay calm. I don't know what you're talking about, he replied. Richard stepped closer until they were only inches apart. Don't play games with me. Security cameras don't miss much. Daniel's heartbeat quickened, but he refused to reveal that the folder had already disappeared. If you've done nothing wrong, Daniel said, why are you so worried? For the first time, Richard's smile faded. He leaned in and whispered, listen carefully. If those documents reach the CEO, your career is over, and so is mine. So do yourself a favor. Bring me the folder before the end of the day. Without another word, Richard walked away. Daniel immediately rushed back to his desk and searched his briefcase again. Nothing. His office drawer. Nothing. His car. Nothing. He closed his eyes. Then it hit him. The house. The folder must have fallen out before he left. At that exact moment, hundreds of miles away from the office, 11-year-old Noah was getting ready for school when he noticed a blue folder lying beneath the hallway table. He picked it up. Then he remembered his father's words. I have to give something important to my CEO. Noah looked at the blue folder, then at the clock on the wall. School could wait. His father had called it very important. Without opening the folder, he slipped it into his backpack. Mom, he said, I have to stop somewhere before school. Emma smiled, assuming he meant the nearby bookstore. Don't be late. Instead of walking toward school, Noah boarded a city bus headed for Morgan Technologies. Nearly an hour later, he stood in the company's grand lobby, surrounded by employees rushing to morning meetings. The receptionist looked at the nervous boy. Can I help you? Yes, ma'am, Noah replied politely. I need to give this folder to CEO Sophia Morgan. My dad said only she should have it. The receptionist frowned. The CEO is in an executive meeting. No visitors are allowed. Noah tightened his grip on the folder. My dad said it can't wait. Before the receptionist could answer, the conference room doors opened. CEO Sophia Morgan stepped into the hallway with several executives. Her eyes fell on the young boy, standing alone. She stopped. What are you doing here, son? Noah took a deep breath, walked toward her, and quietly held out the blue folder. Ma'am, my dad left this folder for you. Sophia accepted the folder without saying a word. This is from your father? She asked. Yes, ma'am, Noah replied. He left home early because he said you had to receive it before anyone else. I found it after he left. Sophia opened the folder. Her confident expression disappeared. Inside were copied contracts, forged signatures, altered ownership records, and photographs linking operations manager Richard Collins to the fraudulent paperwork. Every page pointed to the same conclusion. Someone inside Morgan Technologies had been stealing control of company assets behind her back. Sophia quickly looked at Noah. Where's your father? He's at work. At that exact moment, her assistant rushed into the hallway. Ma'am, Richard Collins has just filed a formal complaint against Daniel Brooks. He's accusing him of stealing confidential company documents. Sophia's eyes widened. She understood everything. Daniel hadn't stolen anything. He had been trying to protect the company. She immediately closed the folder. Cancel my next meeting, she ordered. And tell security that no one leaves this building until I say so. Daniel was called into the executive conference room only minutes later. As he stepped inside, he saw CEO Sophia Morgan sitting silently at the head of the table. Richard Collins stood confidently beside her with a smug smile. There he is, Richard said. The man who stole confidential company records. Several department heads turned toward Daniel. Sophia spoke calmly. Mr. Brooks, before anyone says another word, I want to ask you one question. Daniel nodded. Were you trying to give me a blue folder this morning? Daniel's eyes widened. Yes, ma'am, but I lost it before I reached the office. Richard immediately interrupted. He's lying. He copied those documents to blackmail the company. Sophia slowly stood up. No, he isn't. She placed the blue folder on the conference table. I've already received it. Richard's confident smile disappeared. Sophia opened the folder and spread the documents across the table. These papers expose months of fraud, forged approvals, and illegal ownership transfers. Then she looked directly into Richard's eyes. And every single document bears your authorization. For the first time, Richard Collins had nothing to say. The conference room fell completely silent. Richard forced a nervous smile. Ma'am, these documents have been manipulated. Daniel is trying to frame me. Sophia didn't answer. Instead, she turned toward Daniel. Mr. Brooks, why didn't you come directly to me the moment you discovered this? Daniel took a slow breath. I wanted to, ma'am. That's why I collected copies of every document. I knew accusing a senior manager without proof would only make things worse. Sophia lowered her eyes for a moment. She remembered every meeting where she had humiliated Daniel in front of the staff, every extra assignment, every harsh word. The one employee she trusted the least had been protecting her company all along. Just then, the head of IT entered the room carrying a laptop. Ma'am, we verified the documents. He connected the laptop to the screen. The original files were altered from Richard Collins' executive account. The digital signatures, timestamps, and security logs all match. Richard's face turned pale. The evidence was no longer just on paper. It was recorded inside the company's own system, and there was no way to deny it anymore. Richard looked around the room, searching for someone to support him. No one spoke. The executives who had always agreed with him now avoided eye contact. Finally, Richard slammed his hand on the table. Fine, he shouted. You think one folder tells the whole story? This company would have failed without me. Sophia's voice remained calm. No, Richard. This company almost failed because of you. She pressed the intercom. Security, please come to the executive conference room. Within seconds, 2 security officers entered. Sophia pointed toward Richard. Effective immediately, you're dismissed from Morgan Technologies. Your access to every company system has been revoked. Richard stared at Daniel with anger. "This is your fault," Daniel simply replied. "No. You destroyed your own career the moment you chose greed over honesty." Just then, the police arrived with a warrant after reviewing the evidence Sophia had submitted. As the officers escorted Richard out of the conference room, the entire office watched in stunned silence. For the first time, the man who had made others live in fear was the one walking away with his head lowered. The news spread through Morgan Technologies within minutes. Employees gathered outside the conference room, whispering to one another. Richard was fired. The police took him away. I can't believe Daniel was telling the truth all along. For years, many of them had laughed when Daniel was embarrassed in meetings. Now, guilt replaced every smile. Sophia stepped out of the conference room and looked across the silent office. "Everyone, please return to work," she said. Then she turned toward Daniel. "Mr. Brooks, would you come to my office?" Daniel quietly followed her. As soon as the door closed, Sophia stood still for several seconds before speaking. "I owe you more than an apology." Daniel remained silent. "I judged you by rumors instead of your character. I criticized you without knowing the truth. While I was making your life harder, you were protecting my company." For the first time since becoming CEO, Sophia lowered her head. "I'm truly sorry, Daniel." Daniel looked at her calmly. "People make mistakes, ma'am. What matters is what they choose to do after they realize them." Those words stayed with Sophia because she already knew her next decision would change Daniel's life forever. The following morning, every employee received an email from CEO Sophia Morgan requesting their attendance at an emergency company meeting. The atmosphere was tense. No one knew what would happen next. When Sophia stepped onto the stage, she didn't begin with financial results or company updates. Instead, she looked directly at Daniel, who was standing quietly near the back of the room. "Daniel Brooks," she said, "would you please join me?" The room fell silent. As Daniel walked to the front, Sophia picked up a microphone. "I've spent years believing leadership meant demanding perfection. Yesterday, I learned that true leadership begins with fairness." She turned toward Daniel. "This man remained loyal to Morgan Technologies even when I failed to treat him with the respect he deserved. He protected this company while expecting nothing in return." The audience began applauding. Sophia smiled. Effective immediately, Daniel Brooks is promoted to operations manager. The entire hall erupted in cheers. Michael was the first to stand, clapping with pride. For the first time in years, Daniel wasn't standing before the staff to be humiliated. He was standing there to be honored. That evening, Daniel arrived home carrying nothing but his usual lunch bag. He hadn't told his family about the promotion. As soon as Noah opened the door, he ran into his father's arms. "Dad, did the CEO get the folder?" Daniel smiled. "She did." "And was she angry?" Daniel knelt beside him. "No, buddy. She found out the truth." Emma walked into the living room, confused. "What truth?" Daniel took a deep breath and told them everything, from discovering the forged documents to Richard's arrest and the CEO's apology. When he finished, the room fell silent. Noah looked down at the floor. "I almost went to school instead of taking the folder." Daniel gently placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "But you didn't." He hugged Noah tightly. "You were brave enough to do the right thing when even adults were afraid. I'm proud of you." Tears filled Emma's eyes as she smiled. "For the first time in years," she whispered, "it feels like life is finally changing." Daniel looked at his family and realized something. His greatest victory wasn't the promotion. It was coming home to the people who had never stopped believing in him. The next day, Daniel returned to Morgan Technologies expecting life to go back to normal. Instead, something felt different. Employees who had once ignored him now greeted him with genuine respect. Several even apologized for staying silent when he had been treated unfairly. Daniel simply smiled. "I don't want anyone to carry guilt," he said. "Let's just make this a better place to work." As he entered his new office, there was a gentle knock on the door. It was Michael. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Michael pulled his old friend into a hug. "I've waited years to see this day," he said, his voice breaking. "I hated watching you suffer, but I never had the courage to stand beside you." Daniel smiled warmly. "You stood beside me every day. Sometimes, having one true friend is enough." Later that afternoon, CEO Sophia walked into Daniel's office carrying a small framed photograph. It showed the entire company staff. "I want to hang this here," she said. "Why?" Daniel asked. Sophia smiled. "So I'll never forget that a company isn't built by titles or power. It's built by honest people who refuse to give up, even when no one notices their sacrifices." A week later, CEO Sophia announced a new company policy. From that day forward, no employee would be publicly criticized or humiliated in meetings. If there's a mistake, she told every manager, we'll solve it with respect, not embarrassment. The staff exchanged surprised glances. This was a completely different Sophia Morgan. Meanwhile, Daniel settled into his new role as operations manager. Instead of sitting behind his desk giving orders, he spent most of his time walking through each department, asking employees what they needed to do their jobs better. One afternoon, a young intern accidentally deleted an important report. Terrified, he expected Daniel to shout at him. Instead, Daniel smiled. "Everyone makes mistakes. Let's fix it together." The intern looked at him in disbelief. "Weren't you afraid the CEO would blame you?" Daniel glanced toward Sophia's office. People can change. Just then, Sophia stepped into the department. She had witnessed the entire conversation. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she smiled. Daniel wasn't just improving the company's systems. He was changing its culture, one act of kindness at a time. 3 days later, Daniel was reviewing employee reports when there was a gentle knock on his office door. "Come in." The door slowly opened. It was Noah. Beside him stood CEO Sophia Morgan. Daniel looked up in surprise. "Noah, what are you doing here?" Sophia smiled. "I asked Emma if I could borrow him for a few hours." Noah looked confused. "Did I do something wrong, Dad?" Daniel laughed softly. "No, buddy." Sophia knelt so she was at Noah's eye level. "I wanted to thank the little boy who saved my company." She handed him a small gift box. Inside was a beautiful fountain pen engraved with the words, "Honesty changes lives." Noah's eyes widened. "I didn't save your company, ma'am." Sophia smiled warmly. "You did. If you hadn't brought me that blue folder, I might never have learned the truth." She then turned toward Daniel. "I've made many important decisions as CEO. But the best one wasn't promoting you. It was learning that good people deserve to be trusted." Daniel looked at his son with pride. Sometimes, the biggest heroes weren't the strongest people in the room. They were the smallest ones with the biggest hearts. A month passed, and Morgan Technologies felt like a different company. Employees no longer feared walking into meetings. Ideas were welcomed. Mistakes were corrected with guidance instead of humiliation. One Friday afternoon, Sophia invited the entire staff to the auditorium. "I have one final announcement," she said. She called Daniel to the stage. When he stood beside her, the room erupted in applause. "I promoted Daniel because he earned it," Sophia began. "But today, I want everyone to know the whole story." She told the employees how Daniel had discovered the fraud, protected the evidence, and risked his own career to save the company. Then she paused. But there was another hero. The auditorium doors opened. Noah walked in holding the same blue folder. The audience smiled. Sophia placed a hand on his shoulder. This young man reminded all of us that courage has nothing to do with age. If he hadn't delivered this folder, Morgan Technologies might not exist today. The entire hall rose to its feet. As Daniel looked at his son receiving a standing ovation, he realized something priceless. No promotion, no title, could ever make him prouder than being called Noah's dad. A few weeks later, Daniel was surprised when Sophia invited him and his family to the company's annual Family Appreciation Day. "This year," she said, "I'd like everyone to meet the people who stand behind our employees every single day." For the first time, Emma and Noah walked through the front entrance of Morgan Technologies as honored guests. Employees greeted Daniel with smiles instead of whispers. Michael and his family joined them, and Noah happily ran off to play with Michael's son. When everyone had taken their seats, Sophia stepped onto the stage. "Behind every hard-working employee," she said, "there is often a family making quiet sacrifices." She looked toward Noah. "This young man reminded me that one small act of honesty can protect thousands of jobs." The audience applauded warmly. Sophia then invited Noah to stand beside her. "This company will be creating a new annual award," she announced. "It will be called the Blue Folder Award. presented each year to the employee who shows exceptional honesty, courage, and integrity. The room erupted into applause as Noah looked at his father with the biggest smile Daniel had ever seen. Months passed, but the story of the blue folder was never forgotten. Daniel had transformed the operations department into one of the company's strongest teams. Employees worked harder, not because they were afraid, but because they finally felt respected. One afternoon, CEO Sophia called Daniel into her office. "I have another favor to ask." Daniel smiled. "I'm listening. I want you to help me train every new manager we hire." Daniel looked surprised. "Me?" Sophia nodded. "Technical skills can be taught. Character can't." She handed him a training booklet. On the first page was a sentence she had written herself. "Never judge an employee by their position, because the quietest person in the room may one day save your company." Daniel read the words silently. Then he looked up. "I'll do it, but on one condition." Sophia smiled. "I had a feeling you'd say that. What's your condition?" "Every manager must spend one full day working alongside junior employees before leading them." Sophia extended her hand. "Agreed." From that day forward, Morgan Technologies didn't just produce successful managers. It produced leaders who understood the value of respect. 1 year later, Morgan Technologies announced record-breaking growth. At the annual shareholders meeting, CEO Sophia Morgan stood before investors, employees, and business leaders. When the presentation ended, one investor asked, "What was the biggest reason for this company's success?" Sophia smiled. "It wasn't a new product. It wasn't a bigger budget. It was a change in leadership." She paused before continuing. "A year ago, I made the mistake of judging one employee instead of listening to him. That mistake almost cost this company everything." She then invited Daniel onto the stage. The audience applauded as he walked forward. Sophia handed him a crystal plaque engraved with the words, "Integrity before success." "I've received many business awards," she said, "but presenting this one means more than all of them." Daniel accepted it with humility. "I never wanted recognition," he replied. "I only wanted to do the right thing." The audience rose to their feet. In that moment, everyone understood a simple truth. Great companies aren't built by powerful CEOs alone. They're built by honest people who refuse to compromise their values. That evening, Daniel returned home carrying the crystal plaque Sophia had presented to him. He quietly placed it on a shelf beside an old family photograph. Noah picked it up and smiled. "Dad, you finally got the recognition you deserved." Daniel shook his head. "No, son. The greatest reward wasn't this plaque. It was seeing people treat each other with respect." Just then, there was a knock at the door. When Daniel opened it, he was surprised to see CEO Sophia standing outside with Michael and several employees. Sophia smiled warmly. "I hope we're not interrupting dinner." Daniel laughed. "Not at all. Please come in." Sophia looked around the small home. "This is where the man who saved my company comes home every day." She turned to Noah. "And this is where the little boy who changed my life lives." She handed Noah a framed photograph taken on Family Appreciation Day. On the back, she had written a short message. "Never stop believing that one honest choice can change someone's future." Noah carefully hugged the frame. Daniel looked at his son, then at the people gathered in his living room. For the first time in many years, their house wasn't filled with worry. It was filled with hope. Years later, whenever new employees joined Morgan Technologies, they were told one story before they received their ID cards. It wasn't the story of the company's biggest contract. It wasn't about record profits. It was the story of a blue folder, an honest father, and an 11-year-old boy who refused to ignore what was right. The blue folder was carefully preserved in a glass display case inside the company lobby. Beneath it, a small plaque read, "One act of honesty protected every family that depends on this company." Every morning, Daniel walked past it on his way to work, not with pride, but with gratitude. CEO Sophia Morgan often stopped beside the display whenever visitors asked about it. She would simply smile and say, "The greatest lesson I ever learned didn't come from a business school. It came from an employee I failed to appreciate and a little boy who reminded me what courage truly looks like." That evening, Daniel sat on the porch with Noah, watching the sunset. Noah looked at his father and asked, "Dad, do good people always win?" Daniel smiled gently. Not always right away, son. But if you never stop doing the right thing, life has a way of rewarding honesty when you least expect it. Noah nodded, resting his head on his father's shoulder. And in that quiet moment, Daniel realized he hadn't just earned a promotion. He had given his son something far more valuable. A reason to believe that honesty, kindness, and courage will always leave a legacy greater than success. The end.